D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 1025. The Game. Adam Vingan, Connor Nute, Brandon Bigsby here with you. We hope you are having a wonderful Wednesday. Derek Mason and Willie Donick continue to be on vacation. Both will return on Monday. And I'm wearing Derek's headphones.
Do you feel more powerful?
I do feel stronger.
That's good.
I do feel fitter. Now, I don't think Derek is going to mind that I'm wearing his headphones. He's no Max high maintenance hers. All right. God, once or twice at the arena before a game, I've worn Max's headset and Max was pissed. But that's why we call him high maintenance hers. But Derek's not as high maintenance as you would think a former wide receiver would be. He has some wide receiver qualities, but I wouldn't consider him high maintenance.
No, he's pretty go with the flow. In my time working with him for the past couple months now, he's pretty easygoing. So
I just saw this text from our friend Dustin in Hopkinsville. He says, I think he's saying Dr. Crane and Adam look like they could be twin brothers, to be honest.
I do not see that whatsoever.
We bear no resemblance whatsoever. We both wear glasses. And I think that's about it. I think that is the extent.
You're significantly taller than he is. Then again, everyone is.
Yes, he is more. Where's my bell? I haven't used my bell in a while. Frazier is more industrious.
There we go.
Than I am.
We have an incorporated word of the day this week.
I know. I've been slacking. I've got a lot going on.
Maybe Nick Suss can help us out.
Yes,
today.
Nick Suss, smart guy of the Tennessean, will join us during the 4 o'clock hour as we continue to preview Titans training camp. I believe the first practice is 1 week from today.
Hooray.
So get excited about Titans training camp. Nick Suss will be in with us in about an hour. Trevor Matich will join us in about 15 minutes as we look at SEC Media Days and more. But Connor, admittedly, I'm feeling a little sad today for a couple of reasons. I heard Big Joe and Nick Frazier on the Chase and Big Joe show talking about this a little bit at the end. I've lived in Nashville now for more than 11 years. It will be 11 and a half years in September, which is crazy to say aloud. It's been that long. And I know a lot of our listeners have been living here for decades. Some of you listening may have lived here your entire life, but I've been in Nashville long enough that I understand how people who have lived here for so long feel about the changing world of Nashville. When I moved here in March 2015, that was right before or at the very beginning of the boom. I feel like downtown was a much different place, even when I moved here more than 10 years ago. And today I felt a little sad because I woke up this morning and I saw a story written by my friend Brad Schmidt over at the Tennessean about how Nashville in Green Hills is closing next summer.
Yeah.
And now I can relate to people who have been here for so much longer than 11 years about yet another local institution going the way of the dodo bird. It makes me a little sad. The neighborhoods are changing. Those local places are disappearing. For example, 12 South Taproom was one of the first places I went to when I moved to Nashville. I met my now in-laws for the first time at 12 South Taproom. And now 12 South Taproom is gone. And I think there's like a Ralph Lauren there now, or there's going to be a Ralph Lauren now. I mean, how many more designer stores do we need? I saw a story the other day that the San Antonio Taco Company is being purchased by the group that also owns Edley's. So I guess it's still local, but the San Antonio Taco Company is an institution on West End, right near Vanderbilt. So when I woke up this morning and I saw that Nashville is closing at the end of next June, it made me sad. And I could relate to all of you who have lived here for decades, your entire life, the places you used to frequent before Nashville became Nashville. They're disappearing rapidly. I mean, hell, A place I used to love to go so much after a Predators practice, Rotiers, over by Centennial Sportsplex. French bread hamburgers. Oh, yeah. I ate so many of those. It did not help my waistline, but it was delicious. Rotiers is gone. And I know Rotiers was there for a very long time. I mean, I would love to know, 615-737-1025. What was that place, that local place that closed, that made you realize Nashville just isn't the same as it used to be? 615-737-1025. Connor, you're a lot younger than I am, but is there a place like that for you?
I mean, what we're talking about right now is certainly one. I just ate breakfast the other day with a few of my high school buddies at Nashville. Great breakfast place.
Yeah, I mean,
great flapjacks.
A few weeks ago, my mother-in-law was in town, and she watched the kids because my wife and I needed some time to ourselves. And where did we go? We went to Nashville. I mean, where am I going to get my Reubens now?
There was a nice little local pizza place that used to be around here. It's been closed for 10 years now, but we used to get it all the time. It was called Snappy Tomatoes. It was right off of Highway 100, I think. And it was really, really good. And then they all of a sudden closed. And now it's like some nail salon place, I think. But that was kind of my youthful moment of things are changing. This is how life works. Things come and things go, and it's not the same. So Nashville closing is very sad to me. It was very close to where I grew up. So I was there a lot. We ate there. Again, great pancakes, great breakfast menu. Only thing, you would love it because you walk in and the first thing you see is a Duke Blue Devils
I noticed that the last time I was there.
I don't know why it's there,
but I'm not going to complain about it.
I think you probably gave more of a tip because of that.
Maybe. But the good news is Nashville isn't closing until its lease expires June 30th, 2027. So we
have to just rampage.
Yes, we still got about a year with Nashville. So yeah, that made me sad this morning. Something else made me sad this morning, Connor Nute. Are you familiar with the day the music died?
American Pie?
No. I'm going to read directly from Wikipedia, which I know. Fabulous source. On February 3rd, 1959, American rock and roll musicians Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and the Big Bopper, J.P. Richardson, were killed in a plane crash near Clear Lake, Iowa, together with pilot Roger Peterson. I guess you were right, actually. The event later became known as the day the music died, after singer-songwriter Don McLean referred to it as such in his 1971 song, American Pie. So I stand corrected.
Yeah, it's a very famous song lyric.
Good for you, Connor Nute. Well, I think we have a new entry. Wednesday, July 22nd, 2026, is the day the music actually died, because Pat McAfee announced earlier today he's releasing an album. I can't believe this. I thought it was a joke. I thought it was Pat McAfee's way of trolling all of his haters. I mean, look, with the ESPN layoffs earlier this week, I think there were reports that McAfee's making like $60 million a year. He's taken a lot of heat for that, fairly or unfairly. And I thought this was a way to stick it to the haters. But I guess this is a real thing. Pat McAfee is releasing an album titled The Diary of a Polarizing Figure, August 14th, 2026.
I mean, what does music come to? Who is actually going to buy this and listen to this?
I have no clue. But I believe that some of it was produced here in Nashville, and I have to say, I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed, Nashville. I know we're Music City, but we have to draw the line somewhere. Do we need to produce a Pat McAfee album? Do we need to do this?
I mean, I knew he did a song. You and I were talking about this before the show. It's called Dookie.
Yes, like the Green Day album.
And it, in fact, was Dookie, not like the Green Day album. We don't need more of this. To me, this is the definition of, I have so much money and I don't know what to do with it, so I'm going to do this, and you people have to deal with it. Again, who is willingly going to be in anticipation of the Pat McAfee musical album? And can he even sing? Is it just him talking with auto-tune behind him? because that's kind of what modern rap is now, in my opinion.
The only time I've heard Pat McAfee sing is when he's singing a fight song on College Game Day,
which is fun.
But I've never come away with like, wow, what a set of pipes Pat McAfee has.
Right.
Like, you know, like, do we need this, guys? Like, I saw this, and here's how I found out about it. When I woke up this morning and I logged on to X, and in the corner where it said today's news, it was like Pat McAfee announces he's releasing an album. And I said, no way that's true. Somebody got duped by a fake Pat McAfee account, or he's trolling. I think this is real. I really do think this is real. And again, if anybody here in Nashville had anything to do with this, I'm disappointed. I think this is worthy of stripping the nickname Music City from Nashville. If you had anything to do with this, I'm disappointed. Look, I don't know what else to say. McAfee, he's all over the place. Love him or hate him, Pat McAfee has built an empire. It's admirable. It's respectable. You can't knock him for the hustle, but
I can knock him for horrible music.
You can. Dustin says, chill, guys. He might be the next Marky Mark. LOL. Another texter says, a lot of music these days is trash, so his album would fit in. That's disrespectful to trash.
Yeah, I would agree.
I mean, it could also be trash. Anyway. So, one texter says, someone on the radio, regardless of the genre, ought to know what the song American Pie is about. I think you should sit out a segment. You know, I've heard American Pie many, many times. I guess I did not make the connection between the day the music died and the song American Pie. I think more of the raunchy movie versus the song. But
no, I was not referring to the movie.
I know.
Which is a great movie.
I know. And he also says, I miss Caesar's Italian restaurant off of Whitebridge. Benjamin says, you already know Jelly Roll is going to be featured. I mean, come on. They were in a WrestleMania program, for God's sake. There absolutely is going to be a Jelly Roll cameo on this album. But yeah, I saw that and I said, and that was the day the music actually died.
I mean, we're getting there.
615-737-1025. So those two things made me a little sad this morning. One, finding out that Nashville, one of my favorite restaurants in town, a beloved local institution, will be closing at the end of next June. So that made me sad. And then I was sad for the world of music when I learned that Pat McAfee is releasing an album.
Someone said, will it be produced by Def Rebel?
That's a wrestling joke for you wrestling
yes,
fans.
It is.
615-737-1025. Let us know. What was that local place, restaurant, store, whatever, that when it closed, it made you realize that, hey, Nashville isn't the same town that it used to be. I mean, we all love living in Nashville, but you know how Nashville is. It's a much different place than it was even 10, 15 years ago. 615-737-1025. On the other side, Trevor Matich will join the program. We'll get into SEC Media Days with Trevor. Very curious for Trevor's opinion on a few of the hot topics coming out of SEC Media Days in Tampa. 615-737-1025. Today, the Nashville Sounds take on the, Sugarland Space Cowboys. First pitch is at 7:05 p.m. Catch all of the action on 94.9 The Fan, presented by Twin Peaks Family Leisure, Maple Street Biscuit Company, and Social Cantina. 1025 The Game will have updates each day during the SEC Media Days. Coverage is brought to you by Shaneco, Tri-State Water, Power, and Air in the Music City kickoff game featuring Ole Miss taking on Louisville September 6th at Nissan Stadium. Get your tickets today at NashvilleSports.com. Adam Vingan, Connor Nute with you here. Speaking of SEC Media Days, let's go to our phone line driven by Wilson County Hyundai.com and welcome in our friend Trevor Matich. Hello, Trevor. How are you?
Hello, Adam. I'm really good. I'm a little surprised, though, that you're not excited about Pat McAfee's album.
Are you?
Yes. I can't wait to hear it.
Okay.
Listen, I don't think Pat is trying to compete with Michael Crawford and Sarah Brightman in Phantom of the Opera. I don't think he's trying to be a vocalist here. I think he's having fun. And he's got a very expensive team around him because he can afford it. And I think it's going to be fun. I mean, can Mick Jagger sing? Really? Is he a vocalist?
I mean, I would trust him more than Pat McAfee to belt the tune.
But not really. Mick Jagger is an all-timer of a front man, but he's not necessarily a vocalist. Vince Neil of Motley Crue, is he a vocalist? No. Audiences love him, especially female members of the audience love him. And it's not because he's an ideal vocalist. It's because he's a great frontman. Pat McAfee is a great frontman. And I can't wait to see what he does coming out with an album. I just can't wait.
Okay, well, I will task you with listening to it, and I expect your review next month upon the album's release. But in the meantime, Trevor, this idea of the SEC breaking away has been percolating for a while. And Greg Sankey brought it back up to open SEC Media Days earlier this week. He called it, quote unquote, real. I'm wondering here, Trevor, what the SEC's options are. If the SEC indeed breaks away, what would that look like? What should we expect?
Well, if the SEC broke away from college football completely and just played each other and had their own SEC championship and that was it, I think it would be the end of the SEC. It would be a disaster. But I don't know that that's what Commissioner Sankey was talking about. I think it was more like they would break away further from the rules of the NCAA and from the lack of rules when it comes to NIL and, transfer situations and stuff like that. Because I think what he's really upset about is that you can't really lock in as a conference and as an institution to how exactly NIL is supposed to work, how exactly tampering is supposed to be limited, if it is at all, when it comes to the transfer portal, how spending on players can work. And I think there are some programs that are trying to live by the spirit of the law, and they're trying to do the right thing, while others are looking for every angle they can to get away with as much as they possibly can without getting sanctioned. And so right now it's really a wild, wild west. And if Congress doesn't make an overall umbrella set of rules, or if, the Power Four conferences plus Notre Dame or whoever can't figure out how to handle it themselves, I think it is the relative weakness of the NCAA in imposing some sort of order on this wild, wild west that college football has become that's most frustrating for Sankey. So I don't see him pulling the SEC out of the rest of college football and going their own way, but I could see the SEC saying, okay, we're going to ignore you, NCAA, in terms of your rules and your enforcement. We're going to do it ourselves within our own conference, and you just try to sue us because we will win the lawsuit. So to me, it's more of a shot across the bow of the powers that be to tell them to get their act together, or else the NCAA is going to do their own act from a standpoint of enforcement of rules.
The Athletic published yesterday, Trevor, its college football quarterback tiers. The Athletic ranked every projected starter from 1 to 138. And I think perhaps the most controversial choice was Arch Manning coming in at number 7 behind Trinidad Chambliss, Dante Moore, CJ Carr, Darian Mensa, Julian Sayin, and Drew Mestamaker. Arch Manning at 7, too low or just right?
Potentially it's just right, but he hasn't proven it yet. last year he really improved as the season went on. And for all the criticism that Arch took playing quarterback for Texas last year, I was a big fan of his because he walked barefoot through broken glass to make plays for that team when guys around him weren't making plays. And if it weren't for him, they wouldn't have had even the season that they had last year. I mean, I thought he was magnificent from a football character and from just a pure effort of will standpoint. Problem is, if you look at him just as a quarterback, he's very inconsistent. He's a tall guy, he's kind of a long strider. The way he steps into throws can be inconsistent. And so he's got a really poor relative completion percentage in passes from the line of scrimmage to 10 yards deep. He misses way too many of those throws. And then he'll make a beautiful throw deep down the field. And that's what makes SportsCenter highlights. But the issue for Arch is that he's got to be more consistent in making the easy plays look easy instead of having too many of the easy plays be really exciting. And I wouldn't put him at number 7 until he proves that he can be more consistent with his technique and more consistent in his accuracy.
Trevor Matich is with us. Trevor, yesterday at SEC Media Days, Clark Lee and the Commodores were featured. Clark Lee took the podium. He said a lot of things. One thing he did say that caught my attention was last season was not an arrival. We know how important Diego Pavia was to the Commodores over the past 2 seasons. 17 combined wins, a 10-win season. This past season, the best season in program history. One thing I've been wondering about, Trevor, I'm wondering how accepting Vanderbilt fans will be if this season does not go as well as last season. I don't think anybody's expecting the Commodores to win 10 games again. But now that Commodores fans have tasted success, what would you consider a successful season post Diego Pavia? And how much pressure would you say is on Clark Lee and Vanderbilt to make sure that these past 2 seasons with Diego Pavia weren't just a flash in the pan?
Well, I think he's doing a great job of filling out that roster and retaining guys that could transfer or go on to the NFL. I think the culture there now is a stable, steady culture, and that hasn't been that way for a long time at Vanderbilt. So I like what Clark Lee is building there. But I think a successful season would be 8 wins. 8 regular season wins. They had 10 regular season wins last year. It could have been 11. They came roaring back and had a chance to beat Texas in the fourth quarter last year, only ended up losing by 3 points. But when you look at their schedule, there are lots of landmines in there. But at Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee are going to be really difficult games for them. They've got to play Ole Miss. They've got to play at Auburn, which I think is going to be super tricky. I think if they can win 8, I think it'll be a good season. 9 would be an outstanding season. Keep in mind that in terms of returning production on both sides of the ball combined, Vanderbilt is last in the SEC. They're only returning in the low 40% of their production from last year. And so I think Vanderbilt fans, I would hope, would understand the gift that they've been given over the last couple of years with Diego Pavia and the way Coach Lee has put things together. And I would think that any Vanderbilt fan that would be disappointed in a 7 or 8 win season this year, they had to look themselves in the mirror. They had to raise their right hand out to the side and then slap themselves in the face as hard as they can. Because Vanderbilt is not Alabama where, gee, we only won 10 games this year. We're really upset about it. Vanderbilt is building to that point, and they're doing all the right things. And the thing about this year's team is that what they can learn from Pavia, and that those 2 teams the last 2 years, is that Pavia was a magician at converting third downs and holding onto the ball, playing keep away from the other side. That rested the Vandy defense and kept the other defense on the field, and that put Vandy in position to win games. And in past years, they haven't been in position to win. That's why when you look at the quarterback situation, they've got the 5-star in there that looks like he's going to be an absolutely fantastic player. but he's got to earn the job before he ever gets there. That's Jared Curtis. He doesn't need to go in there and be a superhero and show why he's a 5-star recruit. He needs to look at film of Diego Pavia and see how Diego Pavia managed first and second down so that he was in third and manageable, and then how Pavia converted those third downs. And that's what Curtis needs to do. But even with all the production leaving Vanderbilt, they brought in a lot of very promising transfers, especially at receiver. I mean, their group of running backs and wide receivers this year has a chance to be one of the better groups in the SEC. And so they've got some good possibility for hope for Vanderbilt fans. But if Vanderbilt fans get disappointed because they don't keep winning 10 games right now, then those fans aren't really fans. I think those fans need to read a book about how to be a fan.
We're talking to ESPN college football analyst Trevor Matich. Trevor, what do you make of Alabama this season? Obviously, I think they're going to be a very talented roster, but to me, they're not the old Nick Saban days of national championship favorites year in and year out. What do you make of the damage they can do this season in the SEC?
You know, they have a chance to be kind of a breakout team, which is a little bit weird because they did made the playoffs and won a road playoff game last year, but they got completely crushed by Indiana in their final playoff game, and they got crushed by Georgia in the SEC championship game. And so, you know, there's a lot of bad feeling emotionally from Alabama fans, but I think they've got a chance to be better on defense than they were last year, as long as some transfers on the D-line, you know, come together. Probably have the best secondary in the SEC, if not the country. The key is going to be two things for Alabama. One is the offensive line. The last couple of years, they've been a very good pass blocking offensive line and a very substandard run blocking offensive line. You know, last year they averaged about 3.5 yards per carry on the ground, and that's just awful for Alabama historically. And part of that was running backs, because there were times when there was a hole, but the running back didn't hit the hole. You know, he closed his eyes and run into somebody's back. You watch him on tape, and there's lots of reasons to be frustrated when you watch Alabama, but that running game has to come together. And the second thing is what happens at quarterback. Ty Simpson from last year became a first-round draft choice of the Rams, and now you've got Austin Mack, who's got a lot of experience in this offense, and then the younger Keelan Russell, who's got the most physical talent that are competing for the job. I think Russell will probably get the job because he can do things physically that Matt can't do, but we'll see. But as long as the quarterback position can make plays, I think that they're going to be fine. And, you know, their receiving core right now has a lot to prove. You know, Ryan Williams 2 years ago, everyone thought he was Superman because of the 75-yard touchdown pass in the final 3 minutes to beat Georgia. But really, that was more bad defense by Georgia than a great play by Williams. Last year, he led the nation in drop pass percentage among receivers who had a qualifying number of attempts. And, you know, these guys are going to have to pick it up. But I think Alabama has a chance to really surprise people this year and do a lot of really good things.
Trevor, Monday, Kentucky coach Will Stein kind of called his shot when, similar to a Kurt Signetti Google me comment, they asked him, what do you think it'll take, or what do you think you have that can help you win big in Lexington? And his answer was me. What'd you make of those comments? Was it a selfish thing, or was that I'm calling my shot, I feel I can deliver kind of thing?
Well, you know, I think he can deliver, but I think he needs to do that. And in other words, he needs to act like that. Right now is not the time for a new head coach in a substandard program to be humble. When you look at what Kurt Signetti did at Indiana, he showed up at his very first, basketball game he went to. He said, Ohio State inhales greatly, using a different word for inhales greatly. And I remember looked at him and said, well, wait a minute, what are you talking about? And he said, you know what? I win. Google me. This is when he took over the Indiana Hoosiers, the losingest football program in the history of college football. And in his first year, they made the playoffs, and last year they went undefeated and won the Big Ten and the national championship in the second year. And I think that Stein at Kentucky looks at that and he says, you know what? There's something to be said for immediately infusing a sense of brash confidence in your players. And Kentucky does have some good players, They didn't have enough to compete for the SEC championship last year. Most people have them picked at or near the bottom of the SEC. But he's trying to establish a culture. And I don't mind it that he's out there saying, we're going to do what Indiana did, which is exactly what he's saying, except he's not saying the word Indiana. And he's not saying we're going to win the national championship in 2 years, but neither did Signetti. So I kind of like it that he's out there, bumping his chest. Good for him.
Trevor, one of the teams that I consider maybe to be a sleeper in the SEC is South Carolina. I'm looking at Shane Bieber, and the season they had last year was obviously disappointing, but I'm looking at the construction of their roster. You bring back Lenora Sellers. You have Nick Harbor at wide receiver. You're handing the ball off to Dylan Stewart. I just think that this team is too talented to have a disappointing year like they had last year. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that's a team that also could be a sleeper here. Last year, their offensive and defensive lines were really young and generally abysmal. I mean, from the year before, pretty much their entire starting defensive line went off to the NFL, and they weren't able to restock adequately on either side of the ball in the transfer portal, but they played a lot of young guys that should come back this year. And if they can turn that experience into production now, being a year older, then they've got a great chance. You mentioned Nick Harbor, a wide receiver who's very famously a sprinter in track. He's a huge guy. Last year, that's all he did was really run fast. This year, the word out of South Carolina is that he has embraced the concept of learning the nuance of being a wide receiver in terms of route running and reading defenses and things like that. And if he can put that nuance together with his physical traits, then he's got a chance to be one of the great individual playmakers in the SEC. And then Lenora Sellers, a quarterback, last year behind that bad offensive line, scrambled around like crazy, took a ton of sacks. I think he was just trying to make things happen when he knew that nobody else really could help him very much. And this year, the key for South Carolina is for Sellers now to trust the guys around him and to play more in Ks, execute the system more, and then take off running when he needs to, and use that great physicality that he has. His offensive coordinator, Kendall Riley, was over in Arkansas with KJ Jefferson, who's another big physical running quarterback with a big arm in Arkansas. And while Jefferson made a bunch of mistakes, when he was on his game, he was phenomenal. And now Briles is over there in South Carolina. I think that Sellers has a chance to be one of the breakout players in college football. And people aren't really talking about South Carolina because everybody's talking about Arch Manning at Texas. They're talking about, can Texas A&M take the next step? And what's wrong with Alabama? And will Georgia be able to make big plays? And will the SEC be able to win the national championship again ever in our lifetime? Because the Big Ten has won the last three. And here's South Carolina over there with a roster that could cause a lot of problems. And I'm excited to watch them.
Trevor Matich has been our guest on D. Mays, Vingan, and Donick. He joins us every week. Trevor, as always, a pleasure. We'll catch up next week.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Josh.
615-737-1025. We'll react to what Trevor had to say. You can as well. 615-737-1025. We are broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville Studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service.
That commitment continues to be reflected in a high level of interest in what happens around our competition. Southeastern Conference football remains the second most watched sports property in the United States, trailing only the National Football League. And we account for just over 40% of the live viewership hours consumed among the four major conferences. Our football programs draw an average of 80,000 fans per game. That's our average number. And this was the stat of my summer. That's the highest average attendance for any sport league in the world. And we're national leaders in attendance in just about every to grow.
That was SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey earlier this week, pumping up the SEC. Nick Suss of the Tennessean will join us at the top of the hour as we transition to the Titans as they prepare to open training camp next week. But Connor, as you're listening to Greg Sankey there talk about all of these great things about the SEC, the ratings, the attendance, what's one thing that's missing from all of that?
The championships.
The championships. I think Pat Forty at Sports Illustrated spelled it out succinctly. Quote, the league hasn't placed a team in the CFP title game since 2022, and its playoff record against outside competition over the past 3 years is 3-7, including absolute beatdowns for Alabama and Tennessee at the hands of the last two champions, Indiana and Ohio State. In bowls and playoff games last season, the SEC went 2-7. I'm starting to get real Uncle Rico vibes and Uncle Rico energy from the SEC and specifically Greg Sankey. It's like that scene in Napoleon Dynamite. How much you want to bet I can throw a football over the mountains? Like that's what that sort of sounded like to me. It's like the good old days. Look, people are coming to our games and people are watching us. Yes, because the SEC continues to be a hot product. No one can take that away from the SEC. But let's not pretend that it's been 3 years since the SEC won a national championship or even placed a team in the national championship game. It's veering toward loser talk a little bit to me, Connor Nute.
I semi-agree. Yes, I think he's dancing around the elephant in the room, and that's disappointing. I would like for Greg Sankey to come out and say, and yes, we know we have not competed for a national championship the last 3 years, but we're working to do that, or something along those lines. I think he's saying the right things in terms of how hot the product is, because it's obvious. In living here and seeing Nashville at its finest, especially when the SEC basketball tournament rolls around, you got fans from every single fan base except maybe Missouri here. It's a hot product, but it is true. And I don't want to say it's loser talk, but it is disheartening to hear he mentioned every single good thing about the SEC and what it's got going for it and miss out on the one big thing that happens to be bad. And look, there's no taking that away from the Big Ten. Over the last 3 years, the Big Ten has been the best conference in college football. They've got the championship pedigree. They don't do as much numbers as the SEC, but they're still on nationally televised games every single week. So they have been the best conference. I think in terms of conference layout, if you want to go play for play, I think the top of the Big Ten and the top of the SEC are comparable. I think the middle of the SEC and the middle of the Big Ten, I would give the edge to the SEC. But with that being said, the top of the Big Ten is winning at championship levels. The top of the SEC is not. So there's no questioning how good the Big Ten is right now. But I'm with you, Adam. I think, I don't want to say loser talk, but it is disheartening to just dance around the one big thing that's missing.
Matthew from Jolton says, one of the wins from the SEC was because my boys in maize and blue were more worried about finding their head coach. I mean, Michigan's got lots of problems right now, Matthew. And I agree with you, Connor, that the SEC is still superior to the Big Ten in its overall depth, because the bottom of the Big Ten, PU,
woof.
it's bad. Wisconsin, Maryland, UCLA, Purdue, yuck. The bottom of the SEC is still stronger than the bottom of the Big Ten. So the overall depth of the SEC is better than the Big Ten. But we all know what the SEC is judged on, and that's winning national championships. My question to you, Connor, is there a team in the SEC this season that you think could end the skid, whether just getting to the college football championship game or winning the college football national championship? Is there a team or teams that you think has a legitimate shot at fixing this for the SEC so that next year, when Greg Sankey goes up there here in Nashville for SEC Media Days, he's not talking about attendance and he's not talking about ratings. He's talking about winning national championships again?
I'm glad you asked, because there's two in my mind. I think Texas and Georgia are the two teams in the SEC that are, I don't want to say head and shoulders, but I think they're a tier above everyone else. Texas, in my opinion, has the best roster construction in the entire nation right now. They've got the quarterback they think. They pick up Cam Coleman in the transfer portal, who is one of the top receivers in the portal. They've got a not lottery pick, that's the NBA, but they've got a first-round draft pick.
I know what you mean.
At their offensive line as well, I believe at left tackle. So in terms of how that roster is constructed, I don't think there's anyone as close to national championship contention as Texas is, if we're going on paper how their roster is constructed, etc. Their problem lies with coaching. Can Steve Sarkisian uplift that team to a national championship level? We'll have to see. Georgia, to me, is interesting as well, because that's a team wanting to restore dominance. Remember, it wasn't long ago they won back-to-back national championships. And one of them was a beatdown at that 63-7 game against TCU in the national championship. Georgia is drooling to get back to that level again. And I wouldn't doubt Kirby Smart to be able to do it. They've got a reasonably light schedule this year for their standards. They don't have the roster construction that Texas has, or that one guy that's going to lift them over. But I really like how Gunnar Stockton plays. I think he's a good quarterback. And they play by numbers. They come at you in waves, similar to what Robert Saleh wants to do with the Titans. Their defense comes at you in waves. Oh, our front line isn't going to get to you? Good thing we have a secondary that can lock down your wide receivers. Oh, our secondary isn't getting the job done? Good thing we have guys in the middle and up front that can get to your quarterback and make that play null and void. So Texas and Georgia, to me, are the two teams in the SEC that I think are capable of winning a national championship the most. I mean, there are sleepers. Like, I think LSU falls in that conversation. Ole Miss falls in that conversation. You could argue Alabama. But if you're going clean cut and dry, I would go Texas and Georgia.
Like, for me, as an ACC basketball fan, it's been 6-7 years since an ACC team won the national championship. Virginia won the title in 2019. The last time an ACC team, I believe, was in the national title game was North Carolina in 2022.
Kansas.
Yeah, it's like that it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right that North Carolina or Duke or Virginia or Louisville, it feels strange that it's been that long since an ACC team won a basketball national title or even been in a national title game. And I have to imagine for all of the SEC fans out there that it feels weird that an SEC team hasn't even participated in a national title game since 2022? It's just a very strange thing. But as I was listening to Sankey the other day, and he talked around it. I think he said, hey, we got more teams in the college football playoff than any other conference. That's great, which means you should have had more chances to win the national championship, and you didn't. So I'm just hoping for Greg Sankey's sake that this time next year, when he's here in Nashville delivering his State of the SEC address, he doesn't have to resort to talking about ratings and attendance to pump up his conference. 615-737-1025. Coming up next, we will transition into the Tennessee Titans. They open up training camp in a week. Nick Suss of the Tennessean will be here with us in studio for the next hour talking Titans. If you have questions for Nick, call us, text us, 615-737-1025. We will get to those questions throughout the hour. Nick Suss coming up next. Connor Nute, Adam Vingan, 102.5 The Game. D-Mace, Vingan and Donick, 1025. The Game, Adam Vingan, Connor Nute, Brandon Bigsby here with you, Willie Donick, and Derek Mason on well-deserved vacation. So we called in a ringer to help us for the next hour as we preview Titans training camp. Nick Suss of the Tennessean is here. Hello, Nick. How are you?
Hello, I'm here, and I'm happy to derail this show for an hour. I can guarantee you whatever you ask. I'm probably not going to do a good job of staying on topic. But we'll be here.
You know what? It's afternoon drive. It's the middle of the summer. Going off topic is sort of part of the job at this time of the year. So if you go off on the tangent, that's okay. But I want to start by asking you two questions that I asked Terry McCormick yesterday when he was sitting in that chair helping us preview Titans training camp. I want to get into your mind a little bit, which I know is an interesting place. As I've gotten to know you, I know that you have.
Don't put that upon yourself.
All right, here's the first question. What is the biggest non-Cam Ward storyline of Titans training camp?
I mean, it's going to end up being Carnell Tate. I don't know if it should be necessarily, but when you use a top 5 pick on a position as premium as wide receiver and as a position as flashy as wide receiver, that's going to be the focus. I think there's going to be a lot of talk, and I know this is Cam adjacent, but the installation of the scheme, the installation of what the offense is trying to be, figuring out this offensive identity after, what do you want to call it, 4 years in the wilderness right now with this offense trying to figure out an identity?
At least.
You could say 5 years. You can say since Arthur Smith left, but I think that adventure combined with the reconciliation of what routes the receiver depth chart is going to take, who is Calvin Ridley in this offense, who is Wan'Dale Robinson in this offense, how do you utilize Alec Iomanor, how do you utilize Chim DK, that sort of stuff. I think that's going to be fascinating, but I think that's all going to be through the lens of, is Carnell Tate the guy you drafted him to be? I know that a lot of people have brought up maybe he's T. Higgins of it all, and you don't use the 4th pick on a guy if you think his ceiling is T. Higgins. You use the 4th pick if you think his ceiling is Devontae Adams, if you think his ceiling is Stephon Diggs, that type of all-pro player that he squint a little bit and you can see him becoming. And I don't know if Carnell Tate is that guy yet. I don't think anybody fundamentally knows, but I think that as this training camp goes on and as you see joint practices against these teams where you're going against Seattle, great DBs in Seattle, you're going against Chicago and Jalen Johnson will be there, and the third team they're facing, San Francisco and Diamodor, Lenore, you're going to have like real number 1 DBs for him to test himself against, not to mention Alontae Taylor and Cordell Flott and the guys here in Nashville. Just kind of seeing him full speed with pads on, maybe not in the preseason games, but in these practices, figure out who he is. I think that's going to be a huge, huge talking point.
The second question, what is the most interesting storyline to you? Not the one that we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about on these airwaves, but something that's interesting to you specifically as you prepare to cover Titans training camp.
I just want to know what the Titans think they are. Like,
that's a complicated question.
What I'm interested in is, so you've spent since March this whole rebrand era, this whole rebrand narrative of what are the Tennessee Titans? Well, the Tennessee Titans are this new look, this revamped identity. The Titans are this stadium that we're opening up next door next year. The Titans are Robert Saleh. The Titans are Cam Ward. The Titans are Mike Borgonzi's reflection. And we know what they're saying, but I have no idea what that is, right? Like, the thing they're selling is a thing they're selling. But what? Like, what does that look like cohesively? What is this identity you're pitching? Why should fans who are skeptical of it buy into it? Why should the entire state buy into it versus just Nashville, which is, I know, something that's a pretty big push of theirs? Why should Nashville buy into it? Why should this new stadium be something that matters to people? Why should this new era and this new identity be something that matters to people? Why should Cam Ward, the capital C celebrity, matter to people more than Cam Ward, the quarterback? What are they? Because, like, we don't have to tiptoe around this. If you ask 100 people on the street, Family Feud style, to name every single team in the NFL, I would guess the Titans would be the 3rd or 4th most commonly forgotten franchise. I still think like 80% of people, if you ask them this question, will be able to name every team in the NFL. That's just how football fans are. That's just how American culture is. I'm not going to say that they are an unknown team, but among NFL teams, their recognition, their name recognition is probably on the lower end, despite the efforts of go and get a Super Bowl for your town, go and get a first-class stadium for your town, go and get a name brand coach for your town, go and get these new uniforms that everybody seems to like. They're going through the paces of being recognized. But are they being recognized, and what will they look like once they're being recognized? That is the central question to this new era of Titans football that begins this year.
And a lot of that, Nick, hinges on Robert Saleh. And I'm curious for your opinion on a couple of things about not just Saleh, but the Titans coaching staff in general. What are your expectations for Saleh now that he is removed from the dysfunction that typically engulfs the New York Jets?
It's $1 million question. It's so hard to put an expectation on it, because talking about who his defense should be or what his defense should be almost feels hyperbolic. He, in a dysfunctional Jet situation, still put together top 3 defenses his 2 full seasons. If you don't count year 1 as year 1, and he got fired 5 games into year 4, those 2 seasons in the middle there, that was a top 3 by yards allowed per play defense both years. And that was mostly with homegrown younger talent. It took a year to establish it, but you go and get Sauce Gardner, you go and get Jermaine Johnson, you go and get all the players that they built internally with. The Titans spent a lot more money this offseason giving him pro-ready, in their prime defenders than the Jets ever did at that time. They took a very different tact. So now you don't want to be hyperbolic. You don't want to say, oh, the guy can just build a top 5 defense whenever he wants. But they went out and got him the players to hypothetically build a top 5 defense right now. And should that be the expectation? I don't know, because last year's San Francisco defense wasn't that, injuries and all. Is that who he is? Did they hire him to be, okay, defense is guaranteed to be top 5, just go get an average offense and you'll be in the playoffs? If that's the expectation, oh, heck yeah, good team, awesome. I don't think that's what we should be thinking in 2026, but it's easy for the mind to kind of drift to that, given the reputation that he comes with.
You talk about defense, and to me, I feel like it's a pretty deep defense on all position groups except for corner. And corner is interesting to me because I think you do a good job of bringing in Alontae Taylor. You bring in Cordell Flott. You like Marcus Harris. But outside of that, there's just not enough depth to me. Do you think the secondary is going to end up being a concern for this team down the stretch?
So the short answer is yes. I do believe that. The longer answer is you find me an NFL team that doesn't have 1 or 2 areas where they're concerned about their depth, and you have found me a magic team. Mm-hmm. Like, it's impossible in the constraints of a 53-man roster and the constraints of a salary cap and all this stuff to be starter caliber depth at every position. And that's particularly true at cornerback and offensive tackle and some of these positions where it's really, really hard to develop depth without playing guys down in and down out. Those are also some positions where there's some of the least rotation among positions in the league. I think safety is probably the least rotated defensive position, but then cornerback will be the second least. If you can, find your magic penny or whatever and keep these guys healthy, I feel pretty okay about the Titans' top 4 corners right now. If you want to throw Joshua Williams in as the 4th corner, I don't know if I think Marcus Harris is a starter caliber nickel yet. I haven't seen enough to be able to say that, but I think that he's projecting to be equal to or an upgrade over what the Titans' number 1 cornerback was at the end of last year. So if you're looking at him as number 3 or 4, and he's an upgrade over the number 1 at the end of last year, obviously you've improved the room, and it's a position where you're not really rotating very much. So the question here isn't, are they deep enough to play a season? I think they are deep enough to play a season. It's, are they deep enough to withstand an injury? And I think the answer is no. I think the answer is no for a lot of teams across the league. We in this room and we as the listeners here have the distinction of paying attention to the Titans more than the other teams. So I cannot tell you what the number 4 cornerback situation looks like in Cincinnati, for example, or in Washington. They might be having the same conversations we're having right now. It's entirely possible that every team in the league is nervous about their number 4 corner. To me, the real question is, look, if Alontae Taylor is good enough to be a true number 1, I think he'll be in the bottom half of number one corners around the league. Is Cordell Flott good enough to be a true number two? I think he'll probably be in the top half of number two corners around the league. Does that offset itself? Depends on how much man you're running, depends on how much zone you're running, depends on how much you're trailing by. How often do you need to use your corners at premium coverage positions? But overall, is this a concern? Yes. Is this concern uniquely Titans-esque? I don't think so.
Well, if you want to go further back position wise on the field, safety is, I think, probably one of the, I don't want to say deepest, but most talented position groups they have. And the reason I say that is because you obviously have Amani Hooker coming back, and then Kevin Winston, who I think is a big X factor, maybe might be the term I would throw out there. I'm curious of what you think of Kevin Winston this season. If he stays healthy, what kind of a player do you think he can be for the Titans?
So I've cited this too many times, and the data might be old at this point, but I think back to one of those anonymous analytics studies that ESPN does every couple of years.
Yeah.
And this was back in like 2022. And they did a study where they asked a bunch of analytics people, hey, what position do you know the most about? And what position do you know the least about? And most about was mixed bag. Some people said quarterback, running back, receiver, whatever you think. Almost unanimously, the question that analytics people said they knew the least about was safeties. People do not know what makes a good safety, because the best thing a safety can do is not factor into the play whatsoever. The best safeties do not get looked at. The best safeties do not get thrown at. The best safeties do not get beaten over the top. The best safeties nowadays are playing a little bit more in the box, so you can see their effects more in the run game or as they're kind of controlling the line of scrimmage. But all of that factors to Kevin Winston in the sense that I think he is a really talented player. I really like the way he practices. I really like the way he handles himself. I think he's an intelligent player. I think he fits with what Robert Saleh likes to do. How much will that factor into the games? I don't know, because I am of the opinion that for Kevin Winston to factor into the games, the best thing he can do is go totally unnoticed and totally forgotten about.
Yeah.
And because that's kind of the parameters I'm operating under, I don't know. The way he plays is very noticeable. The way he plays is very in your face. And there have been many, many great safeties who have been in your face. Troy Polamalu was in your face.
Yeah.
Is that the best way to function as a safety? He's a Hall of Famer. Yeah. Ed Reed, you noticed him every play. He's maybe the best football player I have ever seen. Like, there are some people who are really good at it. But there are also a lot of safeties who thrive because they just don't get beat. Will Kevin Winston be that guy? I don't know if I have the evidence to say that yet, but is he capable of making plays that make us notice him and make plays that benefit the Titans? I think he should be able to graduate to that in this second season for him.
615-737-1025. If you've got a question for Nick Suss of the Tennessean about the Titans, call us, text us. 615-737-1025. We'll continue the conversation coming up next. I've got a couple of Cam Ward related questions for our pal Nick coming up next. Again, if you have a question for Nick, 615-737-1025. And speaking of the Titans, the football offseason coverage here on 1025 The Game is presented by Tennessee Brew Works and Parman Tractor and Equipment. Parman Tractor and Equipment, providing totally outrageous customer service. Visit parmantractor.com. D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5 The Game. Adam Vingan, Connor Nute, joined by Nick Suss of the Tennessean. He'll be with us until the top of the hour as we continue to preview Titans training camp. Nick, first practice a week from today. Am I right?
I think you're right.
Okay, well.
Yes, it is. It is a week from today.
We hope so.
We hope so. We hope for your sake that you're there a week from today for the first practice of Titans training camp. If you've got a question for Nick Suss, call us or text us, 615-737-1025. Let's start with our friend Adam in Portland. Adam, thank you for calling and waiting. Please go ahead.
Nick, here's my question for you, man. So if I hear you talking about Kevin Winston, and I love a hard-hitting safety. I love safeties that punish people. I'm curious if in 2026 there is a place for a hard-hitting safety in the NFL. That's because you look. How many times have we seen it where they will slow down a perfect hit shoulder to shoulder and it's still 15-yard flag? Like, you can't hit anybody hard anymore. So, I mean, unless you might as well just have corners out there that can cover, because you don't need anybody to go out there and take somebody's head off anymore. There's no. I don't know. I think Lance Shelters and Blaine Bishop and these guys you could not go over the middle of the field on them. You can't do that anymore. So is there a point in even having a hard-hitting safety?
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think that there's actually a really interesting line to delineate here between hard hitting at the point of attack and hard hitting as a box safety. I think that if you're conceptualizing a hard hitting safety as a guy who rattles the ball free when it's in the air, yeah, that's a tougher role to play these days, with pass interference being what it is, with contact rules being what they are, and with just the general enforcement of safety, which I think is ultimately a net good for football, but it does change the way that position has to play. That being said, with the way that offensive skill players are getting bigger and faster at the same time, the ability to have a hard-hitting safety, the ability to have a safety who can hit like a linebacker actually does really help the way that you can play your nickel and dime packages. Of you can comfortably take a linebacker off the field and still not feel nervous or susceptible against strong run games. We see so much right now that so many of the strongest, smartest, most innovative offenses in the modern NFL come from coaches who prefer to be run-first coaches. The way that the Shanahan model, the way that the McVay model comes from the ability to build off of the run, the ability to spread you out and still beat you with a physical run-first attack. It's not your I formation, Priest Holmes, early 2000s era of just battering ram somebody, but it is a different way to play modern football. And if you are just putting 5 corners on the field instead of having a true safety, a box safety, somebody who can hit hard, you become really, really susceptible to teams spreading you out and running it down your throat. So I think there is a huge, huge place, and you can look at some of the highest paid safeties in the NFL right now. I don't want to pull up the full list and bore you with it, but if you look at the model of who are the safeties who are being rewarded in this league right now, sure, some of them are your center fielder types, but a lot of them are your hybrid safeties, your Derwin Jameses of the world, who are able to come down and play physical and play downhill, and maybe not be the receiver's in midair, I'm going to put my shoulder in his chest and jar the ball loose, which was always a fairly small part of that person's responsibility to begin with. Maybe not be that person, but be the safety who can function as an early down linebacker and a late down coverage guy against bigger running backs, against bigger tight ends, and against bigger wide receivers. That really is a huge asset to the defense, in my opinion. And I think it's a really good question you're asking here. I think you're hitting on something modern about football, about how the positionlessness of defense has changed the way that you kind of approach covering bigger, faster, stronger players, more athletic players. But I do think that Kevin Winston kind of fits that mold for the Titans.
I'm curious about Cam Ward from this perspective, Nick, because I do like the way that you approach your coverage of the Tennessee Titans. What are your thoughts on how Cam Ward has been covered locally and nationally? Do you think the way we discuss Ward is any different than how other cities talk about young, highly drafted quarterbacks?
That's a really, really interesting way to phrase that question. Yes, I do think it's different. No, I do not think it is meaningfully different.
How do you think it's different?
I think it's different in the sense that the way that Nashville and the Nashville market discusses the NFL is different than the way more entrenched and more historically successful markets talk about their NFL teams. That's not to say we are easier or harder on the Titans than other markets are on their teams, but like we'd all be lying to ourselves if we said that the callers that you guys get on this show are similar in profile, in conversation, in tenor and tone to what's happening in Philadelphia or what's happening in Los Angeles. Every NFL market is going to be different. And I think the discussions of Cam Ward are inherently flavored by the history of the Tennessee Titans and the organization here. It's impossible to talk about Cam Ward if you are a Titans fan without having the built-in backlog of knowing the story of Steve McNair and Vince Young and Jake Locker and Marcus Mariota and Ryan Tannehill and Malik Willis and Will Levis. It is impossible. You want me to throw Billy Volek in there? You want me to throw Matt Hasselbeck and Charlie Whitehurst in there?
Coming.
I can just name Titans quarterbacks. You guys can do this too. The story of Cam Ward is inseparable from that lineage. So the way we talk about Cam Ward is impossible to separate from the Marcus Mariota narrative. It's impossible to separate. It's impossible to separate from Jake Locker and Vince Young. People in this market have a very specific hang up with franchise quarterbacks that have been selected very highly, either not working out or it being impossible to argue whether they did work out or not. The crazy thing about this organization, this fan base, is you can argue that Vince Young and Marcus Mariota worked out, or you can argue they were terrible busts. And that's just something that Titans fans have to wear. So if you're asking, is it fair or unfair the way that Cam Ward is discussed? No, it's not fair or unfair. It's just the way that this city and this market and this fan base talks about their quarterbacks. If Cam Ward had the season he had last year in another market, there are some markets that would immediately be crying bust and that all talk would be about, this is a prove it year, or else you're picking at the top of the draft again next year and you got to replace him. There are some markets that would immediately be saying, okay, that year didn't count. This is the coaching staff that's actually going to define him. Last year was a redshirt year. Last year was a figure out the speed of the game year. I think that the market we're sitting in right now is kind of somewhere in the middle of that. And I don't think that's a good thing or a bad thing. That's just a practical reality of where we are. All of that said, it doesn't matter. Like, quarterbacks in the NFL get talked about.
Yes.
If Cam Ward thought he was going to be an NFL starting quarterback and the focus on the radio would be about his right guard, sure, we're going to talk about the right guard. You might ask me about the right guard. I've got opinions about the right guard, but people are going to talk about the quarterback. He was the number one pick in the NFL draft. He was the focal point of the Titans rebuild. Mike Borgonzi used his first ever draft pick as a general manager of an NFL team to hitch his wagon to Cam Ward. We are going to talk about this until either both of them retire here or both of them are banished from here. Like, this is the future of Titans football and the present of Titans football at the same time. If we were not talking about Cam Ward, that's going to be because Cam Ward isn't here. He needs to be talked about. That's how football coverage works. And I don't want to bore you guys with like back-end site metrics, but like I see what you guys click on. I see what you guys Google search. I see what you guys pay attention to. You guys care about Cam Ward, and that's not a bad thing. But like, we talk about him because you want us to talk about him, and you want us to talk about him because we talk about him. That's how this works. And so I don't know. I've gotten the question before of, are we mistreating him, or are we too easy on him or too hard on him? No, we're just talking about him. We're talking about him. Everybody's got an opinion, and we're always talking about him.
Along those lines, Nick, last week we had Bill Barnwell of ESPN on the program, and he did a recent episode of his podcast with Mina Kimes, and they went through every AFC team and made, I think, what they called bold but believable predictions. And Mina Kimes said about the Titans, her bold but believable prediction was Cam Ward becomes the most divisive quarterback in football this season. I'm wondering if you think that could happen, because the one thing that I feel like will prevent that from happening? Along the lines of what you just said, I feel like Cam Ward hasn't broken into the mainstream national NFL conversation. I can't imagine ESPN devoting time talking about Cam Ward the same way they talk about Caleb Williams. But I was stopped by that. That Mina Kimes, a national NFL analyst, believes that Cam Ward will become the most divisive quarterback in football this season. Her words. What are your thoughts on that?
The pithy way to answer this, as a dork, I can say this: we give too much platform power to the dorks. Like, just fundamentally, the thing that's going to divide Cam Ward is the people who look at traditional understanding of football and the dorks.
Yes.
And the dorks really like Cam Ward. Again, that is not a good thing or a bad thing. A dork. You want to talk to me? You guys hear me talk? You know this voice? You heard me talk for about a half an hour now? Dork man over here. I'm a dork.
We're cut from the same cloth.
This is not me insulting that. But like, if Cam Ward becomes particularly divisive, I've always said divisive and I've always been wrong. If he becomes divisive, it's going to be because he plays in a way that rallies the dorks behind him. And that's cool, man. But like, we exist in a world where Jalen Hurts is a starting quarterback in the NFL.
Will inherit the earth.
We exist in a world where Jalen Hurts is a quarterback in the NFL. There's no world where Cam Ward is going to be more divisive in 2026 than Jalen Hurts, than Lamar Jackson, a two-time MVP who some people think stink because he can't play that well in the playoffs. Like, that level of divisiveness is just so entrenched, so established with these people. Cam would need to like put up MVP numbers on a 3-14 team to be that caliber of divisive. He would need to do something truly incomprehensibly successful on a terrible team, or the Titans would need to get a lot better and Cam would have to stink in order to be that truly divisive. Because I don't think that the mainstream audience that is going to find Cam Ward less successful is going to see the arguments from the other side. I don't think the people who watch football on Sundays and don't think about it the other 6 days of the week are going to necessarily notice Cam Ward in the way that the people who are riding hard for him will notice him. And that makes it a hard debate because I just don't think people are going to be talking about this Titans team as much as maybe the people who live in this city might expect.
Along the lines of Cam Ward, obviously he's playing in a new system under Brian Daboll, and Adam and I talked about this a little bit yesterday, but Brian Daboll, when it comes to coaching quarterbacks, he likes to run a few design run plays. I mean, you can go across the history: Josh Allen, Daniel Jones, Jackson Dart. Could Cam Ward benefit from maybe being involved in design run plays like that?
Maybe. I don't see how he couldn't benefit, but I also don't think he's the athlete that Josh Allen and Daniel Jones and Jackson Dart are.
Right.
Like, you got to separate the scheme from the actual like athletes being used in that scheme. Cam Ward is not as athletically gifted in the run first kind of way as those guys are. And he's not as reckless as some of those guys are. I think that if you look back to the period where Josh Allen was teamed with Brian Daboll, he was in a very reckless phase of his career. He has probably calmed down a little bit since then, but he was more known for the, shall we call it, the Leroy Jenkinsing, which I would use to describe Will Levis a lot early in his career.
Keeping up the dork theme here on the program.
Yeah, that's an old callback for people who heard me talk about Will Levis a lot. But like, Josh Allen was more known for that. And if you guys are closing your eyes and thinking about Daniel Jones, you're probably thinking about him running the ball and doing something crazy legsy. If you're closing your eyes and thinking about Jackson Dart, you're probably thinking about him lowering his head and leading with his helmet.
I'm thinking about Daniel Jones tripping in the open field that one time.
Yeah, you're being more charitable than I am, but that's what I was referring to. Cam Ward, it's hard to think about those moments. That's not what you think about with him. So would he benefit from it? It's possible. It's entirely possible he could benefit from that, but that is not what you build the plane out of when your quarterback is Cam Ward, at least not to the extent you do with Josh Allen or Jackson Dart or Daniel Jones.
Do you think the familiarity that Wan'Dale Robinson has with this system, obviously semi-following Dayball here. Do you think that could be sort of a safety blanket for Cam Ward?
Yeah, I was writing about this yesterday. It's tough. I feel bad for Gunnar Helm because Gunnar Helm should be the safety blanket right now, right? Like,
Yeah.
Cam Ward loved his tight ends last year. I think that the tight ends were targeted 120 times or something like that between Chig and Gunnar, and a couple of stray passes to David Martin Robinson. Now Gunnar is the full beneficiary of that, and he should be the safety blanket. And you have Wan'Dale Robinson, who is a full-time safety blanket. It's going to help. It's going to help to have a guy that I looked at this the other day in 2024 when Dayball had Malik Neighbors as a rookie and had Wan'Dale Robinson as the number 2 receiver in that offense. The two of them combined to be targeted 404 times. It might be 304. Please double check me. They were targeted a metric ton of times. And if you look at Wan'Dale Robinson's usage rate in that offense, I think it was 35% of his targets came on 3rd down and 6 or longer.
Wow.
Like, he was it's 3rd down, you got to get some yards guy. And like, that's him. That's Wan'Dale Robinson. That's what he does. Even when Malik Neighbors was targeted an ungodly number of times that year, I think it was like 170 times in that offense.
Precisely 170.
Yeah, you have Malik Neighbors, and maybe Carnell Tate's that guy, or maybe Tate and Ridley split that or whatever. But like, Wan'Dale Robinson is a guy who you can target 130, 140 times, and they can mostly be on 3rd downs, and they can mostly be to keep the chains moving. And that benefits whoever you want it to benefit. It's a good situation to be in, but it's also, you got to push the ball downfield. Here's a stat that's not going to be fun for Titans fans, but it's a stat I found yesterday and I find deeply, deeply alluring. The last 3 times that an NFL team has attempted 590 or more passes in a season and completed 15 or fewer touchdown passes, their 3 head coaches have been Brian Daboll, Robert Saleh, and Robert Saleh. So there is a difference between volume and production.
Yes.
I think that the volume is going to increase. I do not necessarily know that an increase in volume corresponds to an increase in production. That doesn't mean it won't, but brace yourself for, he's throwing the ball a ton. Doesn't necessarily mean that the scoring is going to go up. It just means that the volume is being ramped up.
615-737-1025. If you've got questions for Nick Suss, he'll be with us for one more segment. 615-737-1025. Our phone and text lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. We'll wrap up the hour with Nick Suss coming up next. Connor Nute, Adam Vingan, 1025 The Game. D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5. The Game. Adam Vingan, Connor Nute, Nick Suss of the Tennessean with us for one more segment. If you've got questions for Nick, call us, text us, 615-737-1025. Cameron on our text line. After you shared that stat about volume and production, said, incredible stat, haha. I just said, oh, bleep, out loud. So
Well, thank you for that, Cameron. And may I just say, as a person who can't help but notice weird things, and B, likes derailing things, the last two bumper songs for my segments have been bad and crazy, and I'm going to notice that. that does feel targeted. I don't know if it's
not
targeted.
intentional.
It's not okay.
I figured out our musical theme today.
one word songs?
Yep.
One word song titles?
Yeah,
Okay.
you got it.
Yeah, I sit here. I'm like, okay, my first time in the studio, and my two bumpers are bad and crazy. Okay,
You are neither of those things.
I'm being treated very, very kindly here. No, very funny, very funny.
So we were talking about coaching, and I want to get your opinion on something that Connor and I discussed earlier this week. I know that there are a lot of Titans fans out there who are excited about Brian Daboll working with Cam Ward, because those Titans fans remember what Brian Daboll did for the career of Josh Allen in Buffalo. But we had Aaron Schatz of FTN Fantasy on the program last week. His FTN Football Almanac 2026 just came out. Highly recommended, by the way, for all of the fellow dorks out there. And I went through the Titan section, and there was something that stood out to me about Daboll analytically. According to FTN Fantasy, Daboll has had 12 seasons as either head 2 with Josh Allen, and then just barely in 2022 with the first Daniel Jones renaissance. So I don't think it takes a rocket scientist, Nick, to guess that the Titans offense will look more competent on a weekly basis because it's Brian Daboll calling the plays and not Brian Callahan. I hope that Brian Daboll knows the rules, although that's not going to be his responsibility necessarily as offensive coordinator. But I've been wondering if Daboll's potential impact on Cam Ward has been overstated. Am I completely off base with this idea?
Okay. I've said this before. I don't think I've said this on this show before. So if you guys are hearing me repeat myself, I'm sorry. If you look at the 6 defining quarterbacks of the 21st century, we are talking Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, and Josh Allen. If you want to throw another quarterback in there, we can. But I would say those are probably going to be the 6 answers for the defining quarterbacks. We can throw Russell Wilson, and if you want, whatever it is, it doesn't change the sample here. And you look at the people who have been offensive coordinators for those quarterbacks and their track records once they've become head coaches, independent of being able to coach those quarterbacks. The best coach on the list is Bill O'Brien. That is the best coach on the list from this lineage.
And that's saying something.
You can look through Tom Brady's offensive coordinators who went on to become head coaches in the NFL.
Hasn't worked out well.
That was Bill O'Brien. That was Josh McDaniels. You can throw Charlie Weiss in as a college head coach. You look at guys who have gone from Peyton Manning's offensive coordinator to head coach in the NFL. Again, the list is Adam Gase. The list is Mike McCoy. It is not going to be a particularly good list. Aaron Rodgers, it's Nathaniel Hackett. It is Joe Philbin. For Patrick Mahomes, I don't think it's anybody. Maybe Matt Nagy for 1 year, but I think that was Alex Smith that he was quarterbacking. Josh Allen has Brian Daboll. Drew Brees has Cam Cameron and Doug Marrone, I believe. It is not an awe-inspiring list. So all of that leads into the question, should people be encouraged by Brian Daboll? If Brian Daboll's best and only incredibly productive years as an offensive play caller came with Josh Allen as his quarterback, it is more than fair to conclude that that had more to do with Josh Allen than it did Brian Daboll. The one massive asterisk here is that Josh Allen is the only quarterback in the history of the National Football League who has been on the developmental trajectory that Josh Allen has been on. There is nobody else who has gone from seemingly not knowing how to play quarterback to MVP of the National Football League, and probably should have won it last year if you want to argue it too. Everybody would have thought he was the best player in the NFL last year, whether or not that made him the MVP. That trajectory is what makes Brian Daboll so salivating as a quarterback's coach, as a play caller, as an offensive coordinator for these Titans. It's not the ability to scheme up points. It's not the ability to get players open. That's going to matter. And on a day-to-day basis, you want that to matter. But the thing that makes him attractive is not whether or not this team is going to put up numbers in 2026. It is that there is exactly one example of a quarterback developing from, that looked rough, to MVP. Because you can say, oh, Peyton Manning threw a bunch of picks his rookie year. The NFL was different back then. And also, he didn't look bad. He just wasn't himself yet. Josh Allen looked like a guy who wasn't going to work. And I don't know. I think that when we are evaluating why people are optimistic about Daboll, we have to acknowledge that Josh Allen probably was the reason for that success. But we also have to acknowledge that Daboll was there when Josh Allen wasn't successful too, which isn't necessarily what you can say about Bill O'Brien or Joe Philbin.
So what do you make of the role of Tony Pollard on this team? Obviously, he's not Derrick Henry. He's not going to be the staple of your offense, and I don't think he necessarily needs to, but I also think he's kind of a running back that goes unnoticed sometimes. So if things are not cooking with the quarterback and the receivers aren't doing their job, can you rely on Tony Pollard to get you some distance and downs?
Yes, you can rely. Yeah, you can rely on Tony Pollard, but a team that relies on Tony Pollard isn't going to make the playoffs or whatever. Like, he's going to be a starting caliber NFL running back. If he's the 12th best running back in the NFL, if he's the 14th best running back in the NFL, you got a 1,000-yard back. Good, like that's good. He's serviceable. He stays healthy. He gets you the tough yards. He's really productive on first and second down. He's always been pretty productive in the red zone. He does a lot of the things you want out of a running back. You shouldn't build the team around him, especially not at this point in his career, but I still think that he has starting caliber skill, and I still think that he can be used in pretty unique ways, and I still think he has some explosive burst to him. And if you're, again, like I talked about with Cam, if it's impossible to separate him from the lineage of Titans quarterbacks, it's impossible to separate Tony Pollard from the lineage of Eddie George and Chris Johnson and Derrick Henry, and that's unfair to him. But as far as like serviceable NFL running backs go, he's 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons. He's good at what he does, and that's good enough to be the starter on an NFL team, and that's good enough to be the starter on this NFL team.
So heading into training camp, to me, there's 2 battles we need to be watching on the offensive line: center and right guard. I think you have opinions on both of those positions. What do you make of the battles that we're going to see between probably Jackson Slater and Cordell Volson on the right guard spot, and then Schlottman and Pat Coogan on the center position?
Opinions might be strong. I don't necessarily see it as a competition at center yet. I want to see it with the pads on, but just based off of early indications and early reporting, it seems like Schlottman has the edge, at least heading into the season, and we'll see if things need to be reevaluated mid-season. At right guard, reading the tea leaves, I do think that can be a competition. I think there are reasons to believe that given the shape of the Titans offensive line, it would behoove the Titans for one of their young players to be starter caliber early. That's not to say that you would start them early, but if you think about it, the average NFL team carries 9 offensive linemen, maybe 8 on game day. You can carry 10 on the 53, but if we're talking about on game day, it's 8 or 9 offensive linemen. And if Schlottman and Volson are your starters, and then you have 3 recent draft picks in Pat Coogan, Jackson Slater, and Fernando Carmona that you want to develop, that A, leaves you no room for veteran depth, and B, doesn't have any tackles, and you need a backup tackle. So you're kind of forcing yourself to either A, put one of your developmental young players inactive, or B, not have the right kind of depth that you need to actually survive a game day. And because of that, I would not be shocked if somebody like Jackson Slater ends up forcing their way into this competition or forcing their hand in the competition just so the Titans can actually activate the players they need to activate and get reps for the players they need to get reps for, especially when we know how much of a premium Mike Borgonzi put last year on playing young players quickly. That could come into discussion at the very least.
Let's go to our phone line, driven by Wilson County, Hyundai.com, and welcome in Ryan. Ryan, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to talk about, I'm already looking to next year's draft. Would you say the weakness on the Titans is offensive line, safeties, and corners? I think that's, they need to address the offensive line for sure, going into next year's draft. Kind of talking a little bit about that.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, good question, Ryan. Offensive tackle becomes a massive need depending on the option in Dan Moore's contract. They can keep Dan Moore around for 2 more years after this. They don't need to turn offensive tackle into a premium need. Cornerback is tricky because they just put so much money into Taylor and Flott. You'd kind of want 2 years of those guys being your top corners without going out and replacing one. And then there is the how do we describe the problem at edge rusher? There is the edge rusher shaped problem that goes unaddressed at the top of every draft, which is, if you look at modern history, the only really viable place to find an A1 caliber edge rusher is in the first half of the first round. Sometimes you will have a Max Crosby fall, but that is much, much rarer than the guys who actually work out are your Myles Garrett, number 1 pick, Von Miller, top 3 pick, Will Anderson, top 3 pick, Aiden Hutchinson, top 3 pick, Micah Parsons. Oh no, he fell all the way to 11. Like, you're going to need to, if you want that guy, if you want the Nick Bosa of the world, you got to pick him where he goes. And those guys always go at the top of the draft. So I would say that is still, in my book, the Titans' A1 need. Even if Keldrick Falk is a guy you project as a potential starter for years to come, you still kind of project him as a number 2 and you go get the number 1, which is what the 49ers did during Robert Saleh's tenure there. They picked DeForest Buckner, and then they picked Eric Armstead, and then they still ended up picking Nick Bosa. You pick those guys early when you get the chance to. So there are some good corners in next year's draft. There are some good tackles in next year's draft. There are some good edge rushers in next year's draft. If you're picking in the top 10 again, you should be able to find somebody at any of those 3 premium positions. I wouldn't pick anyone at another position, barring a massive, massive unforeseen injury or trade.
I think this is an appropriate way to end the hour. Adam says, what the hell are we already looking forward to the NFL draft next year? We haven't even played a preseason game. I think I'm going to throw up. Well, it was just the question that was asked, and Nick Suss was kind enough to answer it. Nick, thank you so much for joining us this hour. We look forward to all of your coverage of Titans training camp starting next week. You can read all of it at Tennessean.com. 615-737-1025. Coming up next, I actually do want to sneak in a Predators thought to open the 5 o'clock hour because I read something today I found incredibly interesting. We'll discuss that coming up next. 615-737-1025. Connor Nute, Adam Vingan, 1025 The Game. D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5. The Game. Adam Vingan, Connor Nute, Brandon Bigsby here with you. Willie Donick and Derek Mason on vacation. They return Monday. A big thank you to Nick Suss of the Tennessean for joining us to talk Titans in the previous hour. Easton Freeze of A to Z Sports will join us at 4 tomorrow.
We'll also get his take on the Odyssey.
I think he's seen it twice.
Yes.
And how long is this movie?
It's about 3 hours.
Jeez.
So that's 6 hours of his life watching the Odyssey.
I have a hard time. My limit for a movie is like 2.5 hours, maybe like 2 hours, 15 minutes. I have a hard time sitting still. Some breaking news for Vols fans out there. Highly touted running back prospect David Gabriel Georges is set to join the Volunteers. He is committed to Tennessee, which I think was the expectation, right? I'm not following all of this recruiting, but I know people are very excited. I did see this from this is a fabulous name. If I were to type into a recruiting reporter name generator, give me a name. Hayes Fawcett would be that name.
Oh yeah.
Hayes Fawcett from On3. Fawcett spelled Fawcett. Great recruiting name for a reporter. Hayes Fawcett says he is set to, David Gabriel Georges, that is set to become the highest paid running back recruit ever. Reported details, 3-year deal, around $2 million per year, and family travel benefits to attend games. So congratulations to Vols fans. You got your guy. Like, again, I don't really follow recruiting all of that much in any sport. I mean, tell me who my favorite team gets, and that's all I really need to know. But I know it is an industry to track these things, and I know Vols fans are excited about the new running back. So go nuts, Vols fans. You deserve it. I actually do want to sneak in a Predators thought here, because I read something this morning that caught my attention from my friend Alex Doherty of the Tennessean, co-worker of our previous guest, Nick Suss. The headline, it grabbed me. 10 years after Shea Weber, why Predators should trade Captain Roman Josi. I'll read the beginning of Alex's story. In summer 2016, the Nashville Predators stunned the NHL world by trading their captain, Shea Weber, to the Montreal Canadiens. Now, 10 years later, could they pull off another stunner? No, defenseman Roman Josi is not the subject of any legitimate trade rumors. No one in the organization has indicated Josi, the team's captain for 9 seasons, could be moved. But that's exactly where things stood with Weber a decade ago. With the organization embracing wholesale change this summer, now is the perfect time to remodel the team's core leadership. And of course, Roman Josi, the captain of the Nashville Predators. By the way, Michael and Madison on the reported contract details for David Gabriel Georges says, hearing contract details like that for an incoming college player genuinely makes me sick. I mean, it's Michael, it's a whole new world out there.
Welcome to college football,
my friend. Welcome to college football in 2026. But Alex Doherty wondering aloud if the Predators should trade Roman Josi. And I understand his argument. Roman Josi is 36 years old. He's got 2 years left on his contract. I'm going to double check that. Pretty sure it's 2 years. He's got 2 years left on his contract. Indeed, 2 years left on his contract. He'll be 38 when the contract expires. The Predators are probably not going to challenge for the Stanley Cup in those 2 years. And if the team is dead set on resetting, trading your captain, your most valuable player, I would argue, would certainly get that process accelerated. But I have a very, 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 very difficult time imagining a scenario where the Predators would trade Roman Josi for a couple of reasons. One, he has a no movement clause in his contract, so he controls this process. Unless Roman Josi sits down with his agent, with his family, with Chris McFarland, and says, you know what? I'm 36 years old. I've got 2 years left on my contract. I don't know how many more cracks I'm going to get at the Stanley Cup. It's probably not going to happen here. So send me somewhere where I can win before I retire. Unless Roman Josi makes that decision himself, he's not going anywhere. He's entrenched in this community. He's raising his family here. Now, his agent, Judd Moldaver, is one of the most powerful agents in the NHL. He represents Austin Matthews, Connor McDavid, and Zach Werenski. And all of those three players have something in common. They've been sort of involved in trade rumors recently, and all three players wanted to take a sort of wait and see approach. Let me see what the organization does before I talk about committing long term. All three of those players, by the way, Matthews, McDavid, and Werenski, are younger than Roman Josi. So a little bit of a different situation. But it wouldn't shock me if Roman Josi had a conversation with his agent, Judd Moldaver, who I believe lives here in town, and they talked about their options. But number one, Roman Josi has a no movement clause. I have a hard time imagining Roman Josi willingly moving on. The other thing, too, is there's a major age discrepancy between when Roman Josi would be traded, theoretically, and when Shea Weber was traded. Roman Josi is 36. I think Shea Weber was 30 going on 31 when he was traded to Montreal for PK Subban 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's a much different situation. Roman Josi near the tail end of his career. Shea Weber was still in his prime years when the Predators traded him to Montreal. So that doesn't mean, Connor, that if the Predators did this, that they couldn't get something valuable in return. There was a time not too long ago where if you said you could have defenseman X or Roman Josi on your team, you get to pick. There was a time not too long ago when I probably could count the defenseman I would take on my team over Roman Josi on one hand. Now you're probably stretching to two.
Mm-hmm.
I could make the case for Cale Makar, Quinn Hughes, Zach Werenski, Evan Bouchard, Rasmus Dahlin. Like there are more defensemen in this league now that I would take on my team over Roman Josi, but they're not that many. I mean, Roman Josi is still, in my opinion, an elite play-driving defenseman. The way that he is able to generate offense from the back end is rivaled by few defensemen in this league. And if there is a contender out there that is looking for a shot in the arm on the back end, you might as well make a call to Chris McFarland and say, hey, would you entertain Roman Josi? Do you think he would entertain Roman Josi? But I appreciate the effort by Alex. But I cannot imagine a world right now where this is a realistic possibility.
No, I don't think there's a snowball's chance in hell that this happens, to be honest with you. I think you laid it out perfectly with the age discrepancy and, situationally, I don't think it's the same because when the Predators traded Shea Weber, they were that young piece away, or at least they felt that way, from being Stanley Cup contenders. As we know, Predators this year probably not going to be Stanley Cup contenders. Now, maybe they can make a push, make the playoffs or something like that, but I don't think they are deep Stanley Cup contenders like some of the other teams in the West. So I don't think it would make sense to flip your captain at the ripe age of 36 away to a contender unless he really, really wanted to. And if I know Roman Josi well enough, I don't know him personally, but if I know the kind of person I think he is, I don't think he's going to want to move off of Nashville. I think he's too embedded in this community. He's too embedded in this franchise. And I think he's established his family lives here. So I don't think he would be able or be willing to move off of Nashville. So again, like you said, appreciate the effort from Alex. I'm sure it was well thought out, but I cannot get in on this whole debate. I just don't believe it's going to happen.
One texter says, Josi is unfairly beloved. Pekka and Shea Weber are on a whole other level. Why is he this untradeable guy? I've gotten flack for this so much. If you can get rid of him and get good assets, then do it. He's just one dude, and he's a defender. I hope the new GM doesn't love him as much. It's no knock on him. He's just not untradeable. That's ridiculous.
He can be. He's got it in his contract.
Look, points aren't everything. Since Roman Josi entered the NHL, there's only one defenseman in the league who has recorded more points than Roman Josi. That's Erik Karlsson. Okay. Roman Josi, as I said, is one of the best offensive-minded defensemen in the NHL. Yes, there are certainly deficiencies in his defensive game, but he was a perennial Norris Trophy candidate for many years. He won the award, something Shea Weber never did, by the way. No knock against Shea Weber, but just pointing it out. Like, I understand that, the Predators haven't reached the heights that a lot of fans wish they had with Roman Josi as their captain. But to say he's unfairly beloved, I think, frankly, I'm impressed by how wrong that is.
Yeah, it's not even close, in my opinion.
One texter says, that is one of the worst takes by a texter I've ever heard. Get him! One texter says, Josi is not as elite as he has been in the past, which is true, but he is still easily the best D-man we've got. Getting rid of him for futures will firmly put our D as a whole in the basement, dead last in the league. I don't see Mac doing that. There's value in the future Hall of Famer teaching the up-and-comers. Also, that would represent, like, hey, like, we are tearing this thing down. If Roman Josi wants out, you're entering that real rebuild that a lot of you have been dreading, that I have been talking about for a long time. Again, Roman Josi is not the defenseman he was at his peak, but I would put him up against some of the best play-driving, offensive-generating defensemen in the league, even today, at age 36. So is he as good as he once was? Of course not. He's 36 years old. He's only getting worse. You don't get better as you get older.
That's every sport. Go across every sport. Michael Jordan regressed as he got older. You could argue LeBron James has regressed.
Yes.
Tom Brady regressed. It happens in every single sport. Not that I'm comparing Roman Josi to all-time great, but it happens in every sport.
Again, like, as I said, I could probably count on two hands the number of defensemen I would take on my team today over Roman Josi. At one point, I would say I could count it on one hand. Now I probably need two, but I wouldn't go much further than that. I mean, Roman Josi is still a very good player in this league. Dylan in Antioch says, as a fan, it would be a hard pill to swallow, but I could understand it only if the return is worth it. And I'm not exactly sure what that return could be, because you're getting an older player. He's got 2 years left on his contract. So if a team were to trade for him, let's say at the trade deadline, you get 2 playoff runs with Josi. But you know that his career is probably going to be over at the end of his contract. Like, I could be wrong. Knowing Roman Josi as I do, I think when this contract is over, I think he's going to retire. Like, yeah. I just envision that happening. So would a team give up a ton of assets knowing all of that? I don't know. But I thought it was an interesting idea. By Alex Daugherty of the Tennesseans, suggesting that the Predators should consider trading Roman Josi. But you also have to look at the moves that Chris McFarland has already made. Like, these are not the moves of a GM. This is not the move of a GM who is looking to start from scratch. You don't trade for Maverick Bourque. You don't bring in Jack Drury and Ross Colton and Niels Höglander and all of the players Chris McFarland has acquired. You don't bring them in if you're trying to tear it down. I think Chris McFarland is being realistic about what this team will probably be this coming season. I think at best this team is probably where it was at the end of last season, a league average team that gets into the playoff race and stays in the playoff mix until the bitter end. But I don't know if that's a move he would make right now. I think if this season went off the rails and Andrew Burnett has the kind of start he's had as Predators coach, and he gets fired, and the Predators are cellar dwellers again, maybe Chris McFarland takes a different path. But for right now, again, I will not say there is a 0% chance, because I never want to say there is absolutely no way. But I would put it right now at like 0.9. Like, I just have a hard time imagining it. 615-737-1037 1025. Alex Doherty of the Tennessean, my dear friend, suggested today in the paper that the Predators should easy for me to say, should consider trading Captain Roman Josi. Your thoughts? 615-737-1025. We'll continue the conversation coming up next. Connor Nute, Adam Vingan, 1025 The Game. Oh boy, I hope Joe Rexroad isn't listening right now. This song triggers Joe Rexroad.
Not a Bobby Roode guy?
I mean, if you covered the Predators' 2017 playoff run, you heard the song a ton. And it was fun at first, but then it became a little bit grating. Now, I don't hate it as much as Rexroad does. If Rexroad is listening right now, he might be steering off the side of the road. But I appreciate the nostalgia. I do. I appreciate the. I mean, talk about a wrestler who got a theme song over, right? Like the entrance theme was bigger than the wrestler. That's how I feel about Joe Hendry. Like Joe Hendry, excuse me, not a great wrestler, but got a great song. I'll give him that.
Bobby Roode was a good wrestler. He was just horribly booked.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But this is not a wrestling show. This is it could be a Nashville sports talk radio program. And my friend Alex Daugherty of the Tennessean wrote a story published this morning with the headline 10 years after Shea Weber, why the Predators should trade captain Roman Josi. And I think it's a bold proclamation, a bold take by my friend Alex. I can't imagine a scenario where that happens. Caleb on our text line says, all the casuals texting in truly don't get how a no trade clause works. Predators would have little to no leverage in a trade that Josi would even have to agree to go to. I mean, that does play a factor into it. Roman Josi has a no movement clause, which means he has complete and total control over the situation. Let's go to our phone line driven by Wilson County, Hyundai.com, and welcome in Dylan. Dylan, thank you for calling. Go ahead.
Hey, Adam. You got me thinking about that. With the trade for Roman Josi and what you would get, I mean, really, what are you going to get? Like a second-round pick and a couple third-line players. You're going to look at it and be like, he's more worth it if I'm Chris McFarland to keep around, retire, be a cornerstone, work with the young guys and be the good player he's always been. And now that I think about it, I don't really think there probably is a trade realistically that I would be satisfied with. And, he should have won, in my opinion, the Norris twice that year. Cale Makar won it. So, I consider him a two-time Norris winner. That's just me. But you just got me thinking about that, Adam. And, I mean, realistically, what would you think you would get for him realistically? I'll hang up and listen. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Dylan. It's a good question. I'm trying. I should have done this. Shame on me for not doing some more research before today's show. I should have looked at recent trades involving older defensemen with similar traits as Roman Josi. Perhaps I could look back, for example, at the Erik Karlsson trade, the trade that sent Karlsson from the Sharks to the Penguins. Let's see here. I think that involved at least one first-round pick. I'll double check on what that trade was. I also have to remember off the top of my head how old Karlsson was when that deal went down. I want to say he was roughly the same age as Roman Josi, maybe in his mid-30s. But I do remember Karlsson, who I also believe had a no-movement clause in his contract, had the influence on the decision to trade him to Pittsburgh, and the return, I feel like, was underwhelming as a result. So I'll look that up. But my guess would be it would involve a first-round pick, but if you're trading him to a contender, it's a low first-round pick, something in the low to mid-20s. And as we talked about in the lead-up to the NHL draft, the further down you go, your odds of finding a franchise player diminish significantly. I mean, Roman Josi has been a smashing success as a second-round pick. That doesn't happen very often. Yep. So I do think if this were to happen, as suggested by Alex Daugherty of the Tennessean, that I do think a lot of Predators fans would probably be disappointed by what you would get back.
Yeah, I'm trying to put this in football terms just because it helps me a little bit. What I came up with is, let's pretend this is Jeffrey Simmons, and the Titans decide to flip Jeffrey Simmons over to Seattle. Yes, you may get a first-round pick back, but are you okay with having a low first-round pick? Because if Seattle is competitive and Seattle goes and wins the Super Bowl, guess what pick you get? Number 32. Are you okay with that? Is that the kind of return that you expect to get for your entire franchise? And I'm not saying Roman Josi is the Nashville Predators' entire franchise, but he is a key franchise player. So I think You're right, Adam, in that if this were to happen, which again, I don't think there's a chance in hell that it happens, but if this were to happen, I don't think you would get the return that you would see for a Cale Makar or Quinn Hughes
No,
or someone like that.
Of course not. I mean, Quinn Hughes was traded for the equivalent of 4 first-round picks. There was an actual first-round pick, but then the Canucks also got 3 players drafted by the Wild with first-round picks, if memory serves. So it was the equivalent of 4 first-round picks. So back in August of 2023, the Penguins acquired Erik Karlsson from the San Jose Sharks. It looks like Karlsson was 33 at the time of the trade. Josi is now 36. Here was the return. Mikael Granlund, old friend,
Preds legend,
Mike Hoffman, Jan Ruda, and a 2024 first-round top 10 protected pick. Not great. So, I can't imagine a scenario where A, it happens, and B, if it happens, you're getting a lot in return, unless it's at the deadline and there's a ton of teams bidding on his services. It's a good thought. It's a good thought. That would be interesting. But I'm being realistic here. I can't imagine a scenario where it happens. And last week, Connor, we had Dom Lucian of The Athletic on the program, and he did an analysis of the NHL offseason and determined through his model that the Predators had the best offseason in the NHL based on the value they added. But a lot of that had to do with the fact that the players that are on their way out were bad, according to Dom's model. Whether it was Fedor Svechkov, Zachary Leroux, Eric Holla, Tyson Jost, the players they've brought in are better than the players they had. But even then, the Predators probably top out as a league average team. I'm wondering what Predators fans would consider a successful season. We talk so much about, hey, what would be a successful season for the Titans? What would be a successful season for Cam Ward? I wonder what Predators fans would consider a successful season, because I think it's more likely than not that they miss the playoffs again. And if memory serves, Connor, if the Predators miss the playoffs this season, that will be 3 years in a row. And the only time that's happened in franchise history were the first 5 years of the franchise, the expansion years of the franchise. So it's been a very long time since the Predators missed the playoffs in 3 consecutive seasons. But if I were to ask you that question, what would you deem a successful season for the Predators this year? What comes to mind?
I would like to say make the playoffs, but is getting swept, as let's say you're the second wild card seed, is getting swept by Colorado really worth it to you? I don't know. So to me, what a truly successful season looks like is making the playoffs, and I would say advancing to the next round. Now, I know that's completely unrealistic thinking if we're looking at this team, but if we're going off realism, I think you are going to look at things that are similar to how last year went. You're going to be around that playoff wild card bubble, maybe on the outside looking in by just a couple of points. But to me, a successful season would be getting in. But I don't know. I think ultimately it's not about wins and losses this season, similar to the Titans. This is kind of the transitional year to me. I think it would be more about, are you showing growth? Are the pieces that you've brought in showing that you can build this and mold this into a competitive team down the line? Because I think this is going to be not a final judgment year for Chris McFarland. Obviously, he was just hired, but this is going to be kind of telling of how Chris McFarland's going to want to run this franchise.
One texter says, I would consider a successful season as making the playoffs with new GM McFarland, but I believe most won't call it one unless they win a playoff series, which I think we are further away from than that. One texter says, I just want to watch playoff hockey. Lenny says, is there any reason to believe that the Predators will be better than they were last year? I do think there is an avenue for the Predators to be better than they were last year. I think the addition of Maverick Bourque will provide a spark. You hope that Ryan O'Reilly and Steven Stamkos can sustain the production they had last season at advanced ages. They're in their mid to upper 30s. I see a pathway for the Predators being better next season, but I still don't think it's going to lead to what a lot of you want. Like, yeah, they'll be better. Maybe they'll make the playoffs, but they'll probably still be a heavy underdog against whichever top team they draw in the first round. The problem for the Predators is their ceiling is limited by the Central Division. Colorado, Dallas, and Minnesota are all going to be better than Nashville. Even if those teams take steps back, all three of those teams are going to be better than Nashville. I think you could make the argument right now that Utah will be better than Nashville. So right now, you're asking me, where do I put the Predators in the Central Division? I say 5th out of 8. And the best they can hope for in that situation would be a second wild card spot. So I think they can be better. I feel like we can talk about them the same way we talk about the Titans. If the Predators show signs, let's say Maverick Bourque gets an opportunity to play second line center and he does really well there, I think that's good. If Matthew Wood builds off of a promising rookie season, I think that's good. If, Ross Colton and Jack Drury, show what they can do with a new opportunity, that's good. I think you have to sort of look at it through that lens. Brad and Franklin says, I do think the judge for a successful season is making the playoffs. I would deem the season a success if they have consistency throughout the entirety of the season. I'm tired of seeing the team struggle for the first 2 months or more of the season with a huge hill to climb in the back half than to try and make the playoffs. One texter says they will be better for one reason, speed, not much better, but better. We were one of the slowest teams last season. McFarland has addressed that significantly. We were always behind the play and got killed in transition. One texter says for the Preds, they are more competitive day to day, have a better record, and make the playoffs. After that is house winning. So I feel like Predators fans need to look at this season the way some Titans fans are going to look at the Titans season, Connor.
Yeah.
Which is pick different important elements and see if you see progress. For the Titans, will Cam Ward take that year 2 step? For the Predators, will Maverick Bourque? He's a natural center. He didn't play a lot of center in Dallas. Now he's going to play center here with a top 6 opportunity. Does he become the future top center for the Nashville Predators? Does he show signs of that? Do the younger players take steps forward? The thing the Predators need to determine, Connor, is when Roman Josi, if he gets traded, when Roman Josi moves on, and Steven Stamkos moves on, and Ryan O'Reilly moves on, and Philip Forsberg gets older, who's going to be the next generation? When you go to Predators games in the plaza at Bridgestone Arena, there's a huge banner welcoming you to the arena.
Mm-hmm.
And right now you see Forsberg and Saros and Josi and Stamkos and O'Reilly. I think that's the group of 5. 3-4 years from now, who's going to be on that poster? Is it going to be Maverick Bourque? Is it going to be Brady Martin? Is it going to be Luke Evangelista? Is it going to be Wyatt Cullen, Riker Lee? Like this is the process I think the Predators really need to take right now. That's the number one priority. Who are the players who are going to lead the next generation? That to me, if you can start finding those players this season, that to me I would consider a success.
Yeah, I really don't like the term house money because I think that implies moral victories, and I'm not a huge moral victory guy, especially in college sports. I can't stand moral victories, but I feel like in this case, you're going to find some moral victories. I hope you do. Kind of like what you just mentioned. Are you finding young pieces on this roster, or maybe some in Milwaukee that haven't played in the NHL yet, that are competitive and that are going to be able to grow? I don't know. We'll see. But to me, a successful season, if we're putting a hard line on it, make the playoffs. That's the ultimate marker for me, if we're putting a marker.
And look, it's going to be tough because, as I said, Colorado, Minnesota, and Dallas, I still think are the cream of the crop in the Central Division. I think Utah has shown a lot of promise. The Mammoth made bold moves this offseason. They traded for Vincent Trocheck. They signed Anders Lee in free agency. They've got a really good young core. Logan Cooley, Dylan Gunther. Clayton Keller is a fantastic player. Like, I think Utah's a little bit ahead of where Nashville is right now. So to me, like, I put Nashville on the same path, same playing field, ice surface, whatever, as Winnipeg and St. Louis. Like, I think the Predators are better than Chicago, but I see that group, St. Louis, Winnipeg, Nashville. All right, who's going to emerge as the 5th place team? And maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I think last year I did a preview for Athlon Sports, and based on I didn't actually pick the division finish, but based on how I wrote about the Predators, they predicted them to finish 7th in the division. I don't think that's what happened. So, maybe I'm just cynical, which I absolutely am. By the way, quickly, I do want to give a shout out to my son, Arlo. I got a video during the last break. My son is in swim lessons right now. And when you graduate to the next level, you get to hit a gong. And for the longest time, he's been a little nervous about hitting the gong. At first, he didn't want to hit it because it meant he was moving up to the next level and he was nervous. So he thought if he didn't hit the gong, he didn't have to move up. My wife sent me a video. He hit the gong. Proud of you, buddy.
Good job, buddy.
I'm proud of you, buddy. Way to keep swimming. Just keep swimming. Just like in Finding Nemo.
Just like Nemo said.
Yep. 615-737-1025. We will wrap up the show coming up next with the game that is sweeping the station and one day the nation. Where are they now? Connor Nute, Adam Vingan, 1025 The Game.